Have you ever felt like your English is stuck? You're applying for senior manager positions, but you're still using basic words like good, important, or I like it. That is exactly why you haven't received that yes from global corporations yet. At the executive level, an interview isn't just a language test, it's a test of your strategic mindset. To reach a B1 to C2 level, you don't just speak, you must persuade. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are hacking 8 real-world interview scenarios, from marketing and tech to healthcare, all delivered at a professional B1 to C2 level. We're moving away from boring grammar and diving straight into boardroom language, the kind of English that turns standard answers into million-dollar strategies. Are you ready to elevate your career? Let's get started.
Good morning, Elena. Please have a seat. I've been reviewing your portfolio, and I must say, your track record in navigating complex supply chain disruptions is quite impressive.
Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. I've long admired this company's commitment to sustainable innovation, so I was thrilled to see this opening.
Straight to the point, then. In this role, you'll be spearheading a multidisciplinary team under some rather taxing deadlines. How do you ensure peak performance without succumbing to burnout?
That's a pivotal question. In my experience, the key lies in strategic delegation and maintaining a high level of emotional intelligence. It's not just about tracking KPIs, it's about fostering a culture of psychological safety. When team members feel empowered to voice concerns early, we can mitigate risks before they escalate into crises.
A sound philosophy. But let's talk numbers. You mentioned in your CV that you optimized operational overheads by 15%. Could you walk me through the methodology behind that?
Certainly. It involved a comprehensive audit of our legacy systems. I identified significant redundancies in our procurement protocols and spearheaded the transition to an AI-driven inventory model. It was a calculated risk, but by leveraging predictive analytics, we didn't just cut costs, we bolstered our overall resilience.
A chuckle softly. Resilience is a buzzword these days, but you seem to have the substance to back it up. Serious tone. Tell me, Elena, where do you see the industry's greatest vulnerability in the next 5 years?
If I'm being candid, it's complacency regarding cybersecurity. As we integrate more IoT solutions into our infrastructure, the attack surface expands exponentially. Any firm that isn't treating data integrity as a core pillar of their business strategy is quite frankly skating on thin ice.
Well said. I think I've heard what I need for today. Do you have any questions for me?
Actually, yes. I'm curious about how the leadership team here balances long-term R&D goals with the immediate demands of the shareholders.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Let's discuss that over the next stage of the interview.
Good morning, Alex. I've had a chance to look over your CV, and I must say, your track record in agile transformation is quite impressive. To kick things off, could you walk me through how your previous experience aligns with the strategic goals of our firm?
Good morning, Miss Sarah. Thank you for having me. Well, to put it succinctly, I've spent the last 8 years bridging the gap between high-level vision and granular execution. In my previous role at Nexacorp, I spearheaded a cross-functional team to overhaul our digital infrastructure. We weren't just looking for a quick fix. We aimed for a scalable solution that mitigated long-term technical debt. I believe your firm is at a similar crossroads, and I'm eager to leverage my expertise to streamline your current workflows.
That's a compelling point. Speaking of workflows, we often face scope creep in our larger projects. How do you navigate the delicate balance between maintaining stakeholder satisfaction and adhering to strict deadlines?
That is a perennial challenge, isn't it? I found that the key lies in proactive communication and radical transparency. I don't believe in sugarcoating potential bottlenecks. Instead, I utilize data-driven forecasts to present stakeholders with the trade-offs in real time. For instance, if a feature request threatens the launch date, I facilitate a value versus effort workshop. It's about empowering them to make informed decisions rather than just saying no.
I like that approach, moving from a gatekeeper role to a facilitator role. Now, let's talk about conflict. Can you recount a time when you had to manage a significant disagreement within your team?
Reflective. Certainly. I once led a team where 2 lead developers had diametrically opposed views on our architectural framework. The tension was palpable and began to stifle our momentum. Determined. I stepped in, not to arbitrate a winner, but to pivot the conversation back to our core objectives. We conducted a blind peer review of both proposals based on objective KPIs. By decoupling the ideas from the individuals, we reached a consensus that actually incorporated the strengths of both designs. It turned a potential fallout into a masterclass in collaborative problem solving.
Excellent. It sounds like you have the emotional intelligence to match your technical prowess. Encouraging. Before we wrap up, do you have any questions for me regarding the company culture or our future roadmap?
Enthusiastic. Absolutely. I noticed in your recent annual report that you're planning to expand into the Southeast Asian market. Curious, how does this team specifically fit into that expansion, and what would success look like for this role in the first 6 months?
That's a very insightful question, Alex. Let's dive into that.
Good afternoon, Liam. Thank you for joining us. We've been keeping an eye on your work with the EcoShift campaign last year. The organic growth you achieved was remarkable. However, our current challenge isn't just visibility. It's conversion attribution in a multi-channel ecosystem. How do you approach this complexity?
Thank you, Ms. Harper. That's a pinpoint accurate observation. In today's landscape, the linear funnel is effectively dead. We're dealing with a fragmented customer journey. My approach is to move away from last-click attribution and implement a data-driven attribution model. By utilizing advanced analytics, we can assign value to every touchpoint, from the first top-of-funnel awareness ad to the final retargeting email. It's about understanding the synergy between channels, not just looking at them in silos.
I completely agree on the synergy aspect. But let's talk about budget. With the rising cost per acquisition, CPA, on major platforms, how do you justify scaling a budget when the immediate ROI might look lean?
It's a delicate conversation to have with stakeholders, certainly. I focus on the customer lifetime value, CLV, rather than just the initial transaction. If we're strictly chasing short-term ROI, we're essentially renting customers. I advocate for a 70-20-10 budget allocation, 70% on proven high performers, 20% on emerging trends, and 10% on high-risk, high-reward experimental tech like AI-driven hyper-personalization. This ensures we're capturing today's revenue while architecting tomorrow's growth.
Intriguing. Architecting tomorrow's growth. I like that phrasing. Speaking of experimental tech, how do you feel about the total integration of AI in content strategy? Does it dilute the brand voice?
It's a double-edged sword. AI is an incredible force multiplier for productivity, but it lacks soul and cultural nuance. Firmly, my strategy is to use AI for the heavy lifting, data crunching, A/B test variations, and SEO groundwork, but the final creative layer must remain human-centric. We use AI to understand the what, but humans define the why. A brand voice is built on empathy, and that's something an algorithm hasn't mastered yet.
Well said. Final question, Liam. If we were to hand you our primary account today, and you noticed a 15% drop in engagement within the first week, what is your immediate protocol?
I don't panic, I dissect. First, I'd run a technical audit to rule out platform glitches or API errors. Second, I'd perform a cohort analysis to see if the drop-off is universal or specific to a demographic. Often, an engagement dip is a leading indicator of creative fatigue. Proactive, I'd have a plan B set of assets ready to swap in immediately while we recalibrate the long-term messaging. In digital strategy, agility is our best defense.
Impressive. Your logic is sound, Liam. I think you'd find our team's pace very much to your liking. Sophia, your reputation for migrating monolithic legacy systems into microservices precedes you. However, many architects fall into the trap of over-engineering for problems that don't exist yet. How do you determine the Goldilocks zone, the perfect balance between simplicity and future-proofing? That's a fundamental tension in our field, Mr. Jensen. My philosophy is rooted in Postel's law. I don't build for every possible future, I build for... That's a fundamental tension in our field, Mr. Jensen. My philosophy is rooted in Postel's law. I don't build for every possible future, I build for extensibility. I focus on reversible decisions. If a choice is difficult to undo, like a database schema or a core communication protocol, I spend 80% of my time there. If it's easily swappable, I prefer a just-in-time architecture. We shouldn't pay the complexity tax until the business requirements demand the interest. Complexity tax, I like that. Let's talk about a real-world scenario. We are seeing a massive spike in write-heavy traffic that our current RDBMS is struggling to handle. Would you immediately advocate for a NoSQL migration, or is there another path? A wholesale migration is a high-risk maneuver that often creates more problems than it solves. Before jumping ship, I'd analyze our access patterns. Could we implement a CQRS pattern, command query responsibility segregation? By separating our read and write models, we can scale them independently. We might use a message broker like Kafka to handle the ingestion spikes asynchronously. It's about surgical interventions rather than an expensive rip and replace approach. Nodding. Good. Now, let's pivot to the human element. As an architect, you often sit between the developers who want the latest tech and the stakeholders who want features yesterday. How do you handle a situation where your technical roadmap is challenged by a tight business deadline? Reflective. It's a negotiation of technical debt. I view technical debt not as a sin, but as a financial tool. Sometimes we should take on debt to hit a critical market window. Firmly. However, my role is to make that debt visible. I document exactly what we are bypassing and schedule a repayment sprint immediately after the launch. I don't just say no to the business. I provide them with the cost of interest for every shortcut we take. Smiling. Transparency is key. Last question. In an era of cloud-native everything, how do you prevent vendor lock-in without adding an absurd layer of abstraction? Strategic. It's about being cloud-smart rather than cloud-agnostic. Total agnosticism is a myth that leads to a lowest common denominator architecture. Focused. I prioritize standardized interfaces. As long as we use containerization like Kubernetes and standard SQL or gRPC protocols, we remain portable enough. We leverage the managed services that give us speed, but we keep our business logic decoupled so that a migration, though painful, wouldn't be fatal. Impressed. You have a very grounded perspective, Sophia. It's clear you've been in the trenches. Shall we discuss our current roadmap?
Good morning, Elena. We are currently at a pivotal point. Following our recent merger, we've seen a significant dip in employee engagement scores and a rise in voluntary turnover. Directly, many see HR as just compliance and payroll. How do you redefine HR to become a catalyst for rebuilding our organizational health?
Composed and empathetic. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. It's a common misconception, but in high-growth firms, HR must be the architect of culture, not just the enforcer of rules. Confident. To address the post-merger friction, my first priority isn't more policy, it's cultural integration. We need to move beyond us versus them and create a unified identity. I don't believe in top-down mandates. I believe in listening tours and pulse surveys to identify the friction points before they turn into a full-blown talent exodus.
Nodding. Talent exodus is exactly what I'm worried about. Our top performers are being headhunted daily. Skeptical. Besides offering higher salaries, which isn't always sustainable, what levers can you pull to increase retention?
Analytical. Compensation is merely a hygiene factor. It gets people through the door, but it doesn't keep them there. To drive sticky retention, we must focus on the employee value proposition, EVP. Thoughtful. I advocate for hyper-personalized career pathing. People stay when they see a trajectory. By implementing a skills-based organization model, we allow employees to move laterally or vertically based on their aspirations. When you invest in an individual's employability, ironically, they are much more likely to stay loyal to the firm that empowered them.
Intrigued. Employability as a loyalty driver. That's an interesting paradox. Let's talk about data. Pragmatic. How do you use people analytics to influence the executive board's decisions?
Decisive. Data is the language of the boardroom. I don't just report on headcount. I present predictive analytics. For instance, by analyzing patterns in absenteeism, performance reviews, and manager feedback, we can predict flight risks months in advance. Assertive. I use data to show the financial impact of disengagement. If we can prove that a 5% increase in engagement leads to a 2% increase in customer satisfaction, HR stops being a cost center and starts being a profit center.
Smiling. You're speaking my language now. One last thing. Diversity and inclusion are often treated as checkbox exercises. Challenging. How do you ensure DEI is woven into the actual fabric of the company?
Firm and principled. It starts with cognitive diversity. It's not about quotas, it's about mitigating unconscious bias in our systems. I'd audit our entire talent lifecycle, from the language in our job descriptions to our promotion criteria. Reflective. Inclusion isn't just about inviting everyone to the table. It's about ensuring that once they are there, they have the psychological safety to challenge the status quo. That is how you drive innovation, and that is a non-negotiable for a modern global firm.
Impressed. Elena, your approach is both rigorous and human-centric. I think your vision aligns perfectly with where we need to go.
Marcus, selling to an SME is one thing, but our enterprise deals often involve 12-month cycles and a dozen decision makers. We've seen too many leads get stuck in the pipeline. How do you prevent a deal from stagnating when the client's internal politics start to interfere?
That's the nature of the beast, Miss Vance. In enterprise sales, no isn't the enemy, indecision is. My strategy is to identify a champion within the organization early on, someone whose personal success is tied to our solution. But I don't stop there. I map out the anti-champions as well. By preemptively addressing the concerns of IT or procurement before they even voice them, I ensure the momentum remains in our favor. I don't just sell a product, I navigate their internal consensus.
Consensus building is critical, but let's talk about the bottom line. We're entering a fiscal year where budgets are being slashed. How do you handle a price objection from a CFO who only sees us as a line item expense?
I never defend the price, I reframe the value proposition. If a CFO tells me we're too expensive, I pivot the conversation to the cost of inaction. I show them the data on how much they are losing every day by maintaining their current inefficient system. I translate our features into boardroom language, risk mitigation, operational efficiency, and EBITDA impact. When you can prove that our solution is a revenue driver rather than a cost, the price becomes a secondary concern.
Intriguing. Cost of inaction. I like that leverage. Now, tell me about your leadership style. How do you motivate a senior sales team when they've just lost a multi-million-dollar RFP after 6 months of work?
It's a gut punch, no doubt, but I treat every loss as a post-mortem opportunity. We don't wallow, we dissect. Was it a misalignment of value? Did we miss a key stakeholder? I keep the team focused on the top of the funnel to ensure we're never over-reliant on a single whale. My role is to maintain their psychological resilience. We celebrate the process and the small wins just as much as the closed-won deals to prevent burnout.
Smiling. Resilience is non-negotiable here. Last question. How do you balance the need for aggressive quarterly targets with the long-term health of the client relationship?
I'm a firm believer in under-promising and over-delivering. Closing a deal by overselling a feature is a suicide mission. It destroys the brand and guarantees churn. I'd rather lose a deal today than burn a bridge for a decade. My goal is to build a strategic partnership where the client views me as an extension of their own team. That's how you get the renewals and the referrals that make hitting those quarterly targets effortless in the long run.
Impressive. You have the grit and the strategy we're looking for, Marcus. Let's look at our current pipeline and see where you can jump in.
Julian, I've been reviewing your portfolio. Your recent rebranding of Lumina was visually stunning, but more importantly, it felt authentic. However, we are currently facing a content fatigue era. How do you lead a team to innovate when it feels like everything has already been done?
That's the creative's curse, isn't it, Miss Klin? We are constantly competing with an infinite scroll of content. My approach is to stop looking at what our competitors are doing and start looking at human truths. Innovation doesn't always mean a new technology. Sometimes it means a subversive perspective. I encourage my team to find the tension in a brand. If we can find what makes a brand slightly uncomfortable or surprisingly honest, we create a thumb-stopping moment that cuts through the noise.
Intriguing. Subversive perspective. I like that. But let's talk about the friction between art and commerce. How do you handle a client who wants to play it safe and dilute a bold creative concept into something bland?
It's a classic tug-of-war. I don't treat the client as an adversary, I treat them as a co-author. When a client wants to play it safe, it's usually rooted in fear of alienating their audience. I use data to provide a safety net for our bold ideas. I show them how calculated risks in creative direction lead to higher brand recall and emotional resonance. I don't just ask them to trust my gut, I explain the semiotics behind our choices and how they align with their long-term business objectives.
Nodding. Using data to defend a gut feeling is a vital skill. Now, regarding leadership, creative teams are notorious for having big egos. How do you manage a high performer whose attitude is toxic to the collective culture?
I have a no divas policy. Talent is the baseline, but collaboration is the multiplier. If a high performer is stifling the growth of others, I have a candid, crucial conversation with them. I try to pivot their ego from look at what I made to look at what I enabled the team to achieve. However, if the toxicity persists, I prioritize the psychological safety of the group. A toxic genius can win you a pitch, but they will lose you a team.
Impressive. That's a brave stance to take. Final question. How do you stay creatively fed while managing the administrative drudgery of a director-level role?
It's a constant balancing act. I dedicate white space in my calendar, time with no meetings, just for analog inspiration. Whether it's visiting an obscure gallery or studying architecture, I need to step outside the digital bubble. My greatest inspiration, however, comes from mentoring. Seeing a junior designer solve a problem in a way I never would have imagined, that's what keeps my perspective fresh. It's about being a curator of talent as much as a curator of ideas.
You have a very holistic view of the role, Julian. It's refreshing. Let's go meet the design leads.
Welcoming, Leo. We've seen your work in implementing social learning at your previous firm. It's impressive. However, we are currently battling change fatigue. Our employees feel overwhelmed by constant new tools and training modules. How do you ensure L&D is seen as a benefit rather than an additional burden?
That's a very pertinent challenge, Ms. Adler. We often fall into the trap of training for the sake of training. My philosophy is to move from macro learning to micro learning. Instead of day-long seminars that disrupt productivity, I advocate for learning in the flow of work. This means providing bite-sized, just-in-time resources that employees can access exactly when they face a problem. We need to stop being a department of curriculum and start being a performance support system.
Performance support. I like that shift in perspective. But let's talk about the board. The executive team is increasingly demanding to see the return on investment, ROI, for training programs. How do you quantify the impact of soft skills training, like leadership or emotional intelligence?
It's the holy grail of L&D, isn't it? I don't rely on smile sheets, those post-training satisfaction surveys. They only measure sentiment, not impact. I use the Kirkpatrick model, specifically focusing on level 3 and 4, behavioral change and business results. For leadership training, we track metrics like internal promotion rates, employee retention in those specific departments, and even 360-degree feedback scores pre- and post-training. If I can't link a program to a key performance indicator, I'll be the first one to suggest we shouldn't run it.
That's a refreshing level of accountability. Now, let's address the future. With AI rapidly changing job descriptions, how do you approach reskilling a workforce that might be afraid of being replaced by automation?
It's about transparency and empowerment. Fear stems from uncertainty. I frame AI as an augmented intelligence tool. My strategy is to conduct a thorough skills gap analysis to identify which tasks can be automated and which human-only skills, like complex problem solving and ethical judgment, need to be doubled down on. We need to foster a growth mindset. I want our employees to view themselves as perpetual learners. The goal is to make them future-proof, so they see AI as their co-pilot, not their replacement.
Co-pilot, not replacement. A very powerful narrative. Final question. How do you handle a department head who refuses to release their staff for essential training because they are too busy?
I don't fight them. I align with them. If they are too busy, it usually means their current processes are inefficient. I show them how a targeted intervention, perhaps a short, high-impact workshop on workflow optimization, will actually buy back time for their team in the long run. I treat department heads as internal clients. When they see me as a partner who helps them hit their targets, the resistance usually evaporates.
You have a very strategic grasp of the L&D landscape, Leo. It's not just about teaching, it's about transformation. Shall we talk about our current talent roadmap? Good afternoon, Clara. In clinical research, a single oversight can compromise years of work and millions in investment. We are currently managing a Phase 3 trial across multiple international sites. How do you ensure data integrity and strict adherence to GCP, good clinical practice, when you cannot be physically present at every site?
Good afternoon, Dr. Aris. You've hit on the core challenge of global trials. I don't rely on luck. I rely on risk-based monitoring, RBM. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, I prioritize sites based on their performance metrics and historical compliance. We implement robust centralized monitoring systems to flag anomalies in real time. If we see a sudden spike in adverse events, or conversely, suspiciously perfect data, we deploy a targeted audit immediately. It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Proactivity is essential. But let's talk about the human factor. We've struggled with patient recruitment and retention in our oncology trials. We're currently 20% behind our target. What would be your immediate intervention?
Oncology trials are notoriously difficult due to the stringent eligibility criteria. First, I'd conduct a protocol feasibility review. Are we asking too much of the patients? If the burden of visits is the issue, I'd advocate for a decentralized clinical trial model, using wearable tech or local nursing visits to reduce travel. Simultaneously, I'd strengthen our relationship with the principal investigators, PIs. We need to ensure they have the administrative support to prioritize our study without burnout.
Intriguing. Decentralized trials are the future, certainly. Now, let's discuss a conflict scenario. What do you do if a high-enrolling site is consistently failing to report serious adverse events, SAEs, within the mandatory 24-hour window?
Patient safety is non-negotiable. My first step is an immediate for-cause site visit. I'd meet with the PI to determine if this is a training issue or a systemic failure. If it's the latter and the safety of subjects is at risk, I wouldn't hesitate to place the site on clinical hold. It's a painful decision for the timeline, but the cost of a regulatory breach, or worse, a patient injury, is infinitely higher. Integrity must come before enrollment numbers.
I appreciate that conviction. Final question. The regulatory landscape, especially with the EMA and FDA, is constantly evolving. How do you keep your team's knowledge current without causing compliance fatigue?
I foster a culture of continuous quality improvement. Instead of annual refresher marathons, we integrate micro-compliance updates into our weekly huddles. We dissect recent warning letters from regulatory bodies to learn from others' mistakes. I want the team to understand the spirit of the law, not just the letter. When they understand the why, which is always patient safety, compliance becomes a professional pride rather than a checklist.
Impressive. Your balance of technical rigor and strategic leadership is exactly what this trial needs. Let's discuss our current pipeline.
Good morning, Sarah. I've been reviewing your portfolio, and your work on the green tech expansion was quite commendable. However, our firm often operates in high-pressure environments where the variables change overnight. How do you maintain your strategic focus when a project's core assumptions are suddenly invalidated?
Good morning, Mr. Henderson. That is a perennial challenge in consultancy. My approach is to move away from rigid planning towards dynamic forecasting. When the underlying data shifts, I don't see it as a setback, but as a pivot point. I lead my team through a stress test of our secondary hypotheses. By maintaining a decoupled architecture in our strategy, we can swap out invalidated modules without compromising the entire project's integrity. It's about being agile, not just in speed, but in mindset.
Agility and mindset. I like that phrasing. But let's talk about leadership. We've all seen brilliant jerks who deliver results but destroy team morale. How do you handle a high performer who refuses to align with the company's collaborative culture?
It's a delicate balancing act. I believe talent is the baseline, but synergy is the multiplier. I would initiate a candid, crucial conversation with that individual to align their personal KPIs with our collective goals. I frame collaboration not as a soft requirement, but as a professional prerequisite. If the toxic behavior persists, I prioritize the psychological safety of the team. A short-term dip in performance is a small price to pay for the long-term health of our organizational culture.
That's a very mature stance. Now, regarding our upcoming move into the APAC market, what do you perceive as our biggest blind spot based on your research of our current trajectory?
If I'm being candid, your current model assumes a degree of market homogeneity that doesn't exist in the APAC region. Enthusiastic. While your digital infrastructure is world-class, the hyper-local nuances of consumer trust in markets like Vietnam or Indonesia require a more human-centric touch. We can't just export a Western blueprint. We need to globalize. I'd advocate for establishing strategic local partnerships to navigate the regulatory and cultural landscape effectively.
Smiling. You've clearly done your homework, Sarah. Encouraging. Do you have any questions for me regarding how we measure success for this role in the first 6 months?
Inquisitive? Absolutely. I'm keen to know how the firm balances aggressive quarterly growth targets with its commitment to ESG, environmental, social, and governance principles.
And there you have it. 8 high-stakes interview scenarios, mastered at a B1 to C2 level. You see, the difference between a good candidate and an exceptional leader isn't just technical skill. It's how you package your value through language. If you found these conversations helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I have a question for you. Which of these 8 industries are you most interested in? Leave a comment below,
and I will personally help you with the vocabulary for that specific role. Also, don't forget to download the PDF script in the description to practice with your friends or in front of the mirror every day. Remember, fluency is a journey, not a destination. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, and I'll see you in the next challenge. Goodbye, and see you soon.